5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
You're listening to Tabletop and Beyond with your host, Justin.
But before we get started, how was your Geek Week?
And co-hosts Dan and Jason.
You have to be willing to let the dice help you tell the story.
Okay, look, this year I'm going to stop mispronouncing words. Join us as we cover board games to war games and beyond.
And welcome back to Tabletop and Beyond. I'm your host, Justin. We got the full crew, Dan and Jason, here with us tonight.
Andy's back.
Dan's back. Dan, I feel like it's been like a month.
Can you take me home? Can you call my daughter? Sorry, I was a little lost.
Last week you were doing some college tours. How did that go?
It was, I had to tell my oldest daughter to not fall in love at first sight at college tours because we got to see what the financial aid package is. It's one thing to go to a big campus and walk around all day. It's another thing to get in, another thing to get in and to pay for it. Those are some extra steps there. So, but she's way more excited about getting into college now after one cool college tour trip than she was prior to. So, mission accomplished.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, we missed you last week.
Thank you.
Our episode on Indie versus AAA was maybe a little meandering.
Yeah, the dog was walking us.
I enjoy listening to the show even when I'm not on it, and you guys are being very too quick to dismiss Rings of Power. That's all I have to say. I'm just going to leave it there.
Oh, dude.
Did you? The last episode was an adrenaline.
I fell asleep during the last part.
What, with the battle? The battle episode?
Yes.
Well, it's time of day. You got to watch time of day.
I don't know.
Don't watch it when you're tired.
I don't know. I'm not impressed.
The best time to watch it is during work the day it comes out.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Good to know.
That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke.
Uncle Sam, that is a joke.
All right, and those are all my rebuttals. Oh, I have one more rebuttal. Love and Thunder was great. You guys are crazy. Done. Mic drop.
I saw Love and Thunder. I thought it was okay.
You guys harshed on it in the last show.
I don't even know what it. Wait,
Thor.
Yeah, but
you guys really.
But I'm not. The thing was, we didn't make a statement about it being bad. We just made a statement that no one talked about it.
No one talked about it.
There was a lack of buzz. Well, it's a comic book. You read the comic, you throw it away. Yeah. And it was a comedy comic book. It was more kind of more funsies than drama and then Shakespearean
I thought there were
drama.
Some great parts. There's some great parts in that movie.
It did.
The whole
it did
part
have some real moments.
With Zeus, that was hilarious.
That was way over the top, but yeah, I liked it.
It's great. So, all right. Well, we've got a great show today. We are going to be talking about how to graduate your fellow gamers so that you're not playing Monopoly all the time.
Womp, womp, womp.
Should never be playing Monopoly anytime.
I have a copy of it on my shelf.
That's for the annual burning, right?
And you have a copy too, I can imagine.
Yeah, does he?
I do. I think I might have thrown it away.
Okay, good for you, dude. That's hardcore, man.
I probably have like University Monopoly up in my attic or something.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about how to get your friends to start playing some of those complicated games you love, and love. But first, as always, how was your Geek Week? Let's start it with Dan. Dan, how was your Geek Weeks?
Well, Kickstarter came in for me today, and I've left the game in plastic because as I was about to open it up, I said, wouldn't it be great to do a box opening for Tabletop and Beyond? Ooh. So I have the Call to Adventure Epic Origins, which is the fantasy D&D compatible version of Call to Adventure. So by the time you build out, you play Call to Adventure, but now there's more magical things and different races and stuff like that and classes. And by the time you get to the end of your hero's story, you can convert your character into like a level 1 D&D character.
Oh, that's
which
right.
Yep.
sounds like a terrible amount of fun. A terrible amount of fun, and I don't even want to play D&D. I just want to create characters, like RPG characters using Call to Adventure. Now, I did get the foam inserts, and I did put those together. Required a lot of, I used the wrong kind of glue. Oh, so, no. I'm just going to say, I'm going to throw a brand under, like, I didn't have like regular super glue because, I just didn't want to go to the store, and it was like, I just wanted to go in the basement and listen to what I wanted to listen to and put the thing together. So I used Gorilla Glue.
Nope.
And Gorilla Glue is not good for anything. I bought a bottle of it like 6 months ago, and every time I try to use it for anything, it is a disaster.
Yeah.
So what happened was these were foam inserts. The Gorilla Glue didn't melt the foam, which I appreciated. Because they're kind of like foam core, paper on top, paper on bottom, foam in the middle, and you build up all these different trays, and the trays are great, and they're colored really great, and it's great. But everywhere where the glue bubbled out, it turned into foamy foam like froth, and then hardened up.
Yep.
So in order for me to use this thing, I've got to go get my Dremel sander and carefully sand off all the foam. So
that's Gorilla Glue, man. Every time I use it,
I'm so done with this. So I've got to start using better adhesive. So it's a handy safety tip, everybody. Get to know your adhesives. Even if your adhesives cost you more money and you think you're going to save some money on adhesives, when you know how they work and you know what materials you're going to test it out on, that use the right adhesive. What I should have done is I should have popped a few things out, done some trial pieces with some whatever glues, plural, and then figured out the one I liked. I would have saved myself so much pain and misery because I'd put together the whole damn thing out of stubbornness, and I should have stopped doing it. But nonetheless,
it's hard to have that patience when you get something new.
Yeah, you're like, I want to do this. So anyway, long story short, I will not post pictures of that because of shame, because all I feel is shame.
Meanwhile, the Gorilla Glue is like, you knew what I was when you picked me up.
You knew what I was. Yeah. So
I never pretended to be anything else.
I got it out of my woodworking area. I've not found a good use for this crap yet on anything. So anyway, all right, I'll shut up now. I have a surprise for Justin. I just wanted to let you know that I did paint my Warcry army, my Sisters of Cain.
Oh, yeah.
Daughters of Cain, but that's okay.
Daughters of Cain, whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, Daughters of Cain. Well, some of them are sisters. There's subgroups in there.
Yep.
Had a hard
Blood sisters.
Yeah, had a hard time painting. It's very easy to paint an orc. It's hard to paint like a beautiful woman, right?
I would totally agree.
You get a splash of paint wrong on the beautiful woman, and suddenly she has armpit hair. Oh. So, I mean, I did some washes on there. I did some like regular matte, opaque paint. The lightest paint I have, which is I think Army Painter Elven Flesh. It's the lightest skin tone. And it was working okay. And then afterwards, I did some Army Painter washes. I did the soft tone, and then I did some red tone. Soft tone did a great job of finding like their rib cages and their navels, and they're really small. And it found all those little things. Nice. And if I didn't put it on there, but it also went into weird places like armpits and other things where I'm like, before I seal them, I want to go through and maybe do a little bit of touch up with some, going back to the opaque Elven Flesh and just saying who cares and having it be okay. But they definitely, they went from looking like plastic Barbie dolls to looking like nasty barbarian chicks that have been fighting in the mud.
Nice.
So I don't know which is the right answer for these babes. But long story short, Daughters of Cain, I can actually play this damn game now, and I bought this set in April.
That's right. We're going to have some, this holiday season, we're going to do some battle reports, too.
Yes, we are.
I don't even know how they play. I finally got to the end of painting them.
We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. And what if I hate them? I don't know. We'll sell it.
You won't hate them. They're freaking little blenders, dude. They have lots of attacks and
I like
do
lots
lots of damage.
attacks.
Have you played? Justin, have you ever played Daughters of Cain? Against?
No.
In Warcry.
No,
in
I have
AOS I have, but not in Warcry.
No, but I did an analysis with Dan Herrera on them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Salty gamer.
They've
Salty
got
sea gamer.
Yeah, they've got a lot of abilities that like increase their strength and damage.
Now, was this Warcry 2.0 or 1.0?
Yeah, yep, even Warcry 2.0. So
okay, cool.
The thing is they can quickly, like, on paper you're like, okay, they're okay, but with a double, they can quickly get up some massive damage and attacks.
Yeah, doubles are so accessible in that game. It's just, you just kind of count as you can use it.
Yeah. So, the thing is they're a little fragile, right? Especially the little witch elves, like the small ones.
So you got to get them in there and swing fast and quick.
Yeah, you gotta
cannons.
be choosy with your little she elves. You gotta be choosy on how you put them in. But
they're basically just wearing bikinis.
Exactly. The Princess Leia's of the Warcry game.
They wear a lot of metal bikinis. Trust me.
Yeah. Well, I like how you said the speed paint found their navels.
Yeah, the speed paint did that. I didn't bother painting eyes in them. I just did the wash. Washes are great for just bringing out facial features. Mm-hmm. But there's some real downsides too. But yeah. Certainly they've not been using the lady razors.
Nice.
So
nice.
Maybe that's a feature, not a bug.
They're progressive.
Maybe it's a fear thing. It's like, oh no, I don't. This chick's freaking me out. I'm gonna run the other way. I don't know. Anyway, Daughters of Cain. I finally got around. So now I feel like I can play a Games Workshop game that I own with an army that I don't know, a skirmish army, not a full army, but a skirmish army that I own.
Well, let's do it. My wife's out of town all next week, so every night.
Every night. My wife is also out of town.
Oh, that's right. She's going to the same place mine is.
As is mine.
Oh, that's right. All three of us. Crap. We're all stuck in our houses.
Yeah. Crap. We need to go in on a babysitter.
We'll just bunch all of our kids together at one person's house with cots and sleeping bags.
Who cares about school? We're gaming our way through this week.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, that was my Geek Week. I have a lot of other stuff because I haven't been on the show a long time. So as the moments come upon me, I'll go, oh yeah, I was doing another thing. All right, somebody else go.
Justin, you go next, man.
So I think last week I talked about how I was had assembled all of the Heart of Gur terrain and models, and I was getting ready to paint it. I threw up on our Facebook page and Twitter and all that stuff a poll, what should I start with? Terrain ended up winning out, and so this weekend I think I got 80% of it done. So I'm pretty happy with it. I was putting on some of the last bits of bamboo color on tonight before the podcast.
Cool. And
just need to put a little bit more on, and got to throw a wash on it, and then dry brush it, and then the bamboo will be done, and then I just got to do some like little rocks and dirt stuff that's around the edges of the terrain. Mm-hmm. But I'm really happy with how it's come out. I think it looks really good, and it's gonna be a lot of fun to play on, and it's gonna look really good for the camera for our battle reps. Reports.
And what's one of your goals with the dry brushing step after the wash? What are you trying to? Are you putting mud on there? Or are you doing grime? What is it?
No. So what happens with some of the washes is like it'll darken the color.
Yes.
More than you want it to, right? And it looks a little dirty sometimes.
Yeah, we just discussed this. Yes, great.
And so if you, especially with terrain, if you dry brush the original color over that. The wash will stay in the recesses, and the dry brush pulls out the highlights.
Oh, good.
So
I'm gonna steal that.
Yeah. So that's a big factor right there. Is dry brushing, especially on terrain, right? Because terrain's like usually got big details. Like the bamboo that I'm doing, it's got those like ridges and like joints. You know what I mean? So I want the wash to get into the joints of the bamboo stalks. And then I want it to pick out the ridges as I go back over it.
Yeah. So it's the same concept with the oil washes with the reductive technique, where you wash it with oil and then you go back and remove it from the edges. You're not actually putting a different color paint on, but the oil stays in the dark recesses, so it darkens it. So you get that sense of a highlight.
Nice.
Two different methods. Yep. They're both good.
Yeah. Well, and oil, you can do the reductive method because it responds to the white spirits.
Right.
Acrylic, you need to dry brush over it because you can't remove the wash because it's acrylic. So
Yeah,
Anyway.
I think they're probably both pretty close in time, though, because you have to revisit all those places you want to change the color of the model.
Yeah.
You're either revisiting it with a Q-tip or a sponge, or you're revisiting it with a dry brush.
I'm going to give the edge to the oil wash, though.
Okay.
Just because you don't have to be as careful about how you wipe it off.
That's true. It's much more forgiving for the blending.
Yeah, because like with the dry brush, like if I'm dry brushing this bamboo, I have to be very careful about how I like don't hit the rocks with my dry brush as well.
Yeah, that's true.
You know?
Yep.
So I have to be careful about how I angle it and get in there and what size of brush I'm using. If I'm taking off an oil wash, it doesn't matter the size of the sponge. It doesn't matter, like, because you're taking it off. So, yeah.
Yeah, way less messy to dry brush, though.
Oh, gosh, yes. And way less stinky, too.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's my first one. The second one is that this is a throwback to 2015. I just started watching Mr. Robot.
That's 2015, huh? Wow.
Yeah. I had never seen it before. It's always been kind of on my bucket list. And
Is that the dude with the hoodie?
Yes. Yeah. It's, what's his name?
He was Freddie Mercury.
He's Freddie Mercury.
Yeah.
Malik, no.
I don't remember much
what's
about
his
that.
name?
I remember trying to watch it, but not being able to get into it. Does it move slow?
Rami Malek is the actor's name. Kind of, but I think it's compelling. Like, I think it's interesting. I think him as a character is interesting. It's like I'm not quite through the first season, and there's been like a couple of twists and turns that I'm like, okay, this might be a little much, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it turns out.
All right.
If they can stick the landing, then it'll be worth it. If they can't stick the landing, then it's like, wow, okay, like this just kind of jumped the shark.
I think it went for so many seasons. It had such a great critical, such critical acclaim. I don't think you'll be disappointed. I didn't get through it, nor did I. I think it came out when I had basic cable, and I didn't jump in at the right time.
Right.
But that, like you, it's always on the back burner of one of those cool ones too.
Wasn't it an HBO show?
No, it wasn't. It was. It's a USA Network production.
Yeah.
So I don't know where. I think it was streamed on Netflix.
Yeah.
Or maybe Hulu.
I remember surfing into it and being completely lost and moving on. I'm like, wow, this is good. I can't understand what the hell's happening. Move along.
But I'm watching it on Prime Video.
Oh, cool.
So it's got all the seasons on Prime Video. And, I mean, it's pretty good. Christian Slater's good. Rami Malek, obviously, like an Academy Award winner, right? Is really good.
Yeah.
So.
Great. Cool.
Yep. So diving into that. I will say that I watched The Peacemaker. The first season of The Peacemaker, which is it's a DC Universe show. It's a spin-off of Suicide Squad.
Uh-huh.
It's got its moments of a little bit of questionable stuff in it. It's an HBO show.
It's an HBO show.
But it was pretty gosh darn funny. Like, it was a pretty good show.
Yeah.
I thought it was hilarious. He's got a friend who's named the Vigilante, and he's like the optimistic sociopath. Like, he has no qualms about like killing guys who he thinks did bad things. Like, he's like, like killing people like murderers and rapists and graffiti artists and it's like, whoa, dude, you can't kill graffiti artists. So anyway, that was pretty good. But anyway, I'm stuck into Mr. Robot right now. I'll give a report as I make my way through it.
Are you guys watching Andor?
I watched the first episode and crashed. I fell asleep so hard.
You need to manage your energy level.
I think there's a little bit of a trend here that we're hearing.
Yeah, I keep falling. Every show that Dan likes, I fall asleep through.
I'll tell you what, though, Andor, that first episode was so slow.
Yeah, it's
got some pacing problems.
A lot of shows are having pacing problems. I think it's because first of all, I know why there's a pacing problem in Rings of Power, because they already got greenlit for like 5 seasons.
Yeah, I know. And that is one of my critiques. Is I'm like, dude, we're not getting to the story because they know that they got 5 seasons left.
Well, and Silmarillion has way less pages in it than like any one of the 3 Lord of the Rings books. It's a thin book. It's closer to The Hobbit. So, and they're covering all this anyway, I won't go into it, but when you plan out 5 seasons, then and you're going to stretch them out over 10 years, clearly you can see what happens. You know, it also has that exact same problem is Apple's Foundation series. They're like, well, yeah, I mean, we're planting seeds for season 4 here, and you know, it totally had face palming this thing. So maybe they'll get better, but I like. The slow part doesn't bother me because I feel like all of the hours I wasted reading Silmarillion have paid off. Like, I don't know why I'm reading this. It's important. It's not entertaining, but it's important. It was important for this damn show.
It's weird because slow isn't necessarily bad. Like the Blade Runner franchise is notoriously a slow moving thing, but it still keeps me enraptured. So I don't know, you know, what is slow is not necessarily bad if it's done in a good way.
Some of these are just a new medium. I think green lighting a story for, I don't know, for 50 hours, right? 5 seasons, 10 episodes each.
It's a lot of time.
And cutting a check for $1 billion. That is an entirely different art form than making a movie where people have to eat popcorn. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you're right, because I've also been watching House of the Dragon, right, which is
no wonder he's falling asleep. He's watching like 7 shows at the same time.
So I've also been watching that show, but that started out very slow, but the pacing's much better. Now, granted, I think it's got its 2nd season approved, but just a 2nd season at this point. Do you know what I mean? I think it's probably got 4 or 5 seasons tops to this show. Maybe not 8 like its predecessor, but you know, maybe there's something to that, like where you have to just be prepared to finish that arc and maybe finish the series at that same point, right? So you got to get through the material.
Yeah. Well, we've been chewing up Jason's Geek Week time.
That's true.
That's okay. I'll make mine fast.
Good.
Because we got lots of news.
I put in like 50 news items.
I know. So, so yes, listeners, you know, hope you joined our show to listen to the news because that's pretty much the main top. No. So my Geek Week is quick. Everybody knows the last couple of episodes have been talking about how I'm finishing up my kill team because I'm really excited to play. So I batch painted my bases for Kill Team. I came up, I think, with what I feel is a really cool scheme, kind of a rustic desert look. I put a couple on in our Discord channel. I actually posted on Instagram for the first time in like 5 years.
Whoa!
And put the bases, and I found out, you know, as everyone else in the world has already known, that I can link it to my Facebook, so I can post one place and it posts ever. Although it does interestingly wait like half a day before it puts it on Facebook.
It's weird like that.
Well, I think it's probably just trying to monopolize the initial feeds, you know, to say come visit Instagram, and then once everyone sees Instagram, then it's okay. Facebook, you can have it too.
Oh,
but anyways, so I'm excited about the bases. I got everything all done with my acrylics, and now I'm just ready. And all my towel are painted too. At this point, I just need to find some time to slap the oil wash on them and do my reductive technique and glue them to the bases. I'll be ready to go. I probably got just another maybe 2 hours, and then my kill team will be ready to go. So I'm excited to do that. Second thing was I rebooted back up Aliens Fire Team.
Oh,
this is this is one we talked about, you know, earlier in the year. That was on Games Pass, but it has a new loadout on it that I haven't played yet, but I jumped into it the other night, and it was just as fun as I remembered. Just running around, really feeling like you're in the Aliens universe, you know, killing some bugs and stuff. I had no idea what I was doing until two games in. Because it's one of those you step away from it for a while and you're like, wait, what's the combo of gun special ability that I'm doing here? But it came back quick, fun game. Still recommend people check it out if you get a chance. So that was fun. Just something to burn the brain when you get home at night, you know, before you start the next day. So easy Geek Week for me.
Very good.
Sweet.
Very good.
Well done.
Yep. Very good. Well, that brings us to our favorite segment when Dan's here. The Geek News.
Okay, baby. Welcome to Tabletop and Beyond News. Is that better? Does that work?
That's fantastic.
That was for you guys. All right. The most important thing is we want to talk about Baron of Dice and our special new relationship with the Baron of Dice. So let's jump in. Who's gonna hit this one?
I'll hit it real quick. Yep, let Justin, you queued up. There we are. There we are. Yep.
This is high production value.
Yeah. So just real quick, everyone, you've heard this last couple episodes, right? Baron of Dice. We have a partnership with them now. Go over to baronofdice.com, https://baronofdice.com. There is no www there. We tried that and realized it took us a minute, but we realized that's right. There's no www in there. Anyways, head over there. Use special code Tabletop and Beyond to get a discount. It helps us out, helps him out. Get all your themed D6 and polyhedral dice there. He's got tons of themes there, so check him out. Support him, support us, and let's keep the dice rolling on the table. Be good times.
Always keep those dice rolling.
It's really a beautiful catalog of stuff. I was really, really impressed. I kind of was wishing I could buy dice for a game. I was like, oh man, I need a game to buy dice for. So anyway, we'll get there.
You do have a game. It's that space opera game.
Yes, it's the space opera game. Yeah, let's cross that bridge when those dice are posted on his store.
With the hero, Atmosphere Strider.
Right. Well, you've also got some miniatures with navals that need dice to go with them.
I know, and I had bought some 6 months ago, and I'm regretting that purchase. So. Yeah, cool. All right, the next piece of news. Free League and Demiplane announced the release of 2 digital tool sets for Nexus. Okay, one is for Alien RPG.
Yeah, I saw this.
Ding! And Mutant Year Zero. So essentially, you get a digital version of the game for $29.99. You get the source book, and you get a Destroyer of Worlds Adventures. This purchase is going to unlock digital references, careers, talent, spacecraft, organizations, alien species, and gear. Now, here's the cool thing. Players can use the site's video, voice, and text chat along with the matchmaking service to join games along with their favorite virtual tabletop. So, you want to play the Alien RPG. You have no one to play it with. Join Nexus. Nexus will find a game for you to play in. Doesn't that sound great? And also, they have Mutant Year Zero as well for $29. That has a starter booklet and a bunch of other great stuff. So those are currently in early access with a planned release of the character creators coming in 2023.
Yep.
So keep an eye out for that. I think it's great. Really, they're really wrapping their arms around the entire player experience, and that's super exciting. Mm-hmm. And who doesn't want to have content from the publisher integrated into the platform? That is always going to be a winner. Since we're talking about Free League, and they are great, we talked about them last week. They have opened pre-orders for the Lord of the Rings role-playing 5e adaptation of the One Ring RPG. They have a 236-page rule book with 6 new classes, 6 cultures, journey and council rules, new monsters, and new magical items. There is also a pre-order for Shire Adventures, a 104-page hardcover with 5 short adventures, along with pre-generated versions of Bagginsons, Tooks, and Brandy Bucks. So if you go ahead and pre-order, you will also immediately get PDF versions of those books. So you get some immediate gratification, and you can wait for the hardcover stuff to come through. Anyway, if I ever ran D&D, I probably would run it in the Lord of the Rings universe, because that's a lore that I feel comfortable with, as we discussed earlier in the show.
Well, I'm looking at the One Ring starter set that I have right now on my shelf that we need to play soon.
Yes, we do.
And this has all that stuff that they talked about in there, right? The Baggins, Tooks, Brandy Bucks, the Shire Adventure.
Yep.
So it sounds like you got a lot of really good stuff A lot of really good stuff coming into the D&D world if you're like totally, versed in 5e.
Yeah. If you're comfortable in 5e and you don't want to learn another system, or your players don't want to learn another system, and you don't want to have to spin them on, hey, we could learn something new, because some groups just won't do it. You've got this, so keep on trucking. In other news, one of my favorite game companies, Brotherwise Games, announced an upcoming role-playing game based on the Stormlight Archive novel series by Brandon Sanderson. So it came on Sanderson's YouTube channel, promoting the current Kickstarter for a set of licensed miniatures for Stormlight Archive. So there's minis and an RPG for you Stormlight Archive fans. Right now, I've also started painting the 8 miniatures that came with the Brotherwise Games of the Dragon Prince, and I'm having a nice time painting those for my son. He loves that series, and I thought I had matched up the characters to the right, character cards to get the paint scheme right, and he corrected me very quickly. He's like, "No, this guy goes here, and this guy goes here," and that was pretty sweet. So. But a lot of gold piping in their outfits. A lot of gold piping. And these are small minis. I need a .0001 brush to do some of those gold piping.
So I was going to say, the nice thing about a Stormlight Archive RPG is that there's a lot. Have you read those books, Dan?
I have not, but I know how much positive buzz there is about them.
Yeah. So the nice thing is that, like, basically these people kind of rediscover these latent superpowers that they have, right? That they're called Knights Radiant, and they each have something different, right? There's somebody that can, like, do disguises on themselves. There's somebody who can run in the air, basically, right? There's somebody who can basically is like super agile, and there's like all sorts of different kinds of Knights Radiant, and there's also like the bad guys that also have their own sets of powers too. So the nice thing about this is it's not going to suffer the kind of like what I call the Witcher problem, where everybody wants to be the Witcher. Like everybody you can have a nice diverse set of superheroes essentially. Now, granted, this is a fantasy novel, so it's not like comic book superheroes,
right?
But fantasy heroes that all have their own unique sets of powers that can solve problems, and I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Anytime there's a system that helps you do storytelling, you're in a good place, right?
Yeah.
And if your players like that story, or if they're compatible with that story, and you can add depth to it, and you have a system, and you don't have to do as much homebrew to connect up all the sinews from one thing to another, it's going to be a winner. I played Genesis Android Shadows of the Beanstalk with a guy who competed competitively in Android Netrunner, in the Netrunner card game. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing. And he really understood the depth of that universe because he had competed and understood all the lore behind all the cards. And so when we played the RPG, it really added a lot. So if you're a Stormlight Archives fan and you don't want to learn D&D lore, or you don't want to learn Lord of the Rings lore, you definitely check it out. All right, this brings us, speaking of D&D, the Wizards of the Coast is doing something really cool that I think is well worth talking about, at least giving Wizards of the Coast some kudos for doing positive things. Wizards of the Coast launched a new program for educators to start Dungeons & Dragons after-school clubs. Now, my kid has been in an after-school club, and there was no curriculum. The teacher just said, "You guys like D&D? Go play it. If you need my help, I'm sitting over here." So, but in this, kits are available to any qualifying organization such as schools, libraries, community centers, or other enrichment organizations. These D&D after-school kits include a copy of D&D Starter Set, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, instructions and guidelines for club organizers, a quick demo and learn to play guide for dungeon masters, easy-to-read character cards, and a poster to promote the club. Wizards of the Coast also provides D&D class curriculum through Young Minds, inspired with free digital packets to help teachers include D&D in their class lessons, with options for grade 4 to 6, which is ages 9 to 12, and grades 6 to 8, ages 11 to 14. Webinars are also available through the International Literacy Association on how to use D&D, including building emotional literacy through Dungeons & Dragons and leveling up reluctant readers with Dungeons & Dragons. Lots of really cool educational toeholds overlapping D&D with kids wanting to play, learning emotional literacy, learning some math skills, learning probabilities. I think this is all good stuff, and it looks like most of this is very cost efficient, if not free. So if any of our listeners who are educators and would run a D&D club or interested in helping kids game, if you're a teacher or you are involved in some other community activity, Wizards of the Coast, I think, is doing right by those groups, and I think that's pretty swell. That's what I got.
Yeah. So I think that's fantastic. And if you think about it, this is an amazing kind of marketing thing for Dungeons and Dragons.
Lost leader, man.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like, yeah, they can print out these little booklets and, I mean, they're little packs or whatever. It probably doesn't cost them that much it probably costs them as much to ship them as it does to print them.
Yeah.
And, you just get them out to these places. But if you can get some of these middle high school kids playing D&D after school, like, you've probably got kids who are buying books much later in life.
Right. Know? Or subscribing to D&D and Beyond.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I really do think this is good. I know my daughter's experience with D&D Club was positive, but still not, how shall I say, optimum. And I think having an involved teacher, she had an uninvolved teacher. I think anything that gives the teacher an opportunity to lead the kids is better than the kids going off in the corner role-playing who gets drunk where. And they did a lot of that in 7th grade, and I thought that was a missed opportunity. So this is a great opportunity to do something exceptional with this tool set, in my opinion.
Yep.
This is opinion-based news. I don't know if you knew that.
No, it's great. Let's see, Jason, I think there's one last thing, right?
One last thing. Scorn is releasing early, October 14th, right around the corner, right? So I'm excited, man. This appears, watching videos, and there's stuff you can get on YouTube and see for a while, but it's looking like body horror to the fullest, right? In a nightmare survival H.R. Geiger and Z. Begzinski themed setting. So really excited about this game. It could go multiple ways, though, right? Whenever you watch people play on YouTube, you're just getting snippets, cuts. So it could be some survival games are really slow and very exploratory. I'm curious to see if this one is linear or if it's, a little more open and it's going to be kind of Metrovania-ish, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'll see. But either way, I think it's going to be pretty gory.
So is this, I mean, you kind of threw it out there, right? This is this more like Left 4 Dead? Is this more like Castlevania? Or is this more like Minecraft meets horror?
I don't think it's gonna be anything like Minecraft meets horror.
I mean, that would kind of be kind of hilarious.
It would be an attempt at something that probably would fall flat on its face. But anyways,
I'm watching some videos here. It does not look like Minecraft.
No. There have been several games like this. I probably should have come prepared to give some that I've played before.
No. This is terrifying.
I think, it's. It looks like it's going to be a theme of a dungeon crawler, right? Where you're trying to escape.
Yeah.
You're probably trapped in some place. You're trying to find your way out. And the only way to get out is to force yourself to participate in the body horror that's happening inside this place.
So, like Doom?
Well, I think you're describing things that are too action oriented. I don't think this is going to be as action oriented.
So, like Silent Hill.
No, I mean, he's walking around
maybe a
with
mix
a gun, first person.
Or Resident Evil.
Maybe a mix of Silent Hill, Resident Evil, The Evil Within, those kinds of settings. That's kind of the
pulled
feeling
out his
I get
umbilical
when I look
cord.
Yeah,
Gross.
I'm not playing this game. But I'm glad you like it. I'm glad you like it. I like this for you.
Yeah,
Dude,
I don't think
this
is one
like
for you.
Horror Halo. I'm not gonna lie. Like, there's
I feel like you're
like
naming action games that are too actiony. I don't get the impression this game
slow
is
down
that
the
actiony.
action and increase the horror, and you got Horror Halo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is
okay.
great.
Okay.
I want to
Totally
know.
change the pace of the game, and you have that game.
Tell us how it is, Jay. I want to know.
Well,
Play it
I'll tell you on October 14th.
Yeah.
I want. Is this co-op?
Oh no, that's a single player.
Go up. Hey, will you please put the spike
Wait,
in
so
my
can
rectum,
you-
please? Can you put a spike in my rectum?
Can you
Thanks.
build a civilization? Because if so, then it's kind of like Civ.
There's an alien wrapping its tongue around, circling.
Is this like Horror Sims?
October 14th, ladies and gentlemen.
Go to
Yeah.
scorn-game.com and make sure your kids aren't around. Because
I'm not gonna lie,
it's not
Jason.
for the week.
Yeah. Oh, that's for sure. I'm not gonna lie, Jason. I kind of wish this was a co-op game, kind of like our No Way Out.
Right?
You know, or like that. What was that? The Mind of Medina? No, not Mind of Medina.
Oh yeah. No, the
Man
no,
of Madeira. Medan.
Medan. Yeah, it was the ghost ship one. The ghost
That
ship
was
one
such
we
a fun
played.
game.
That was fun. There's another episode of that. We should play it.
Oh, dang. Yeah.
It's like a bunch of people run out of gas at like some town enveloped in fog, and they have to like find the way out or something.
Okay, we're playing it. Hands down.
So Scorn says it for itself on Steam. It is a atmospheric first-person horror adventure game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Set in a nightmarish universe of odd forms and somber tapestry.
Somber tapestry.
Somber.
I'm not going to be the same. I just watched just a few clips, and I'm going to have nightmares for weeks. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah,
I
so
like it. It is designed around the idea of being, quote, being thrown into the world, unquote. Isolated and lost inside this dreamlike world, you will explore different and connected regions of nonlinear fashion. The unsettling environment is character itself. I know what this is. This is Horror Mist.
Oh, you know what? I feel
Yeah.
like that is a good, horror mist, but with some actual FPS action, a
Yeah.
little bit
Yeah.
of interaction.
Yeah, a little bit.
That's probably good, or maybe like Phantasmagoria if you ever played that game.
You're talking to the wrong.
I'll take that as a no.
group.
I'll take that as a no.
I think I played Phantasmagoria.
All right, Scorn, everybody.
Okay, yep.
Scorn.
October 14th.
Do it.
I'm going to try to play it like Doom.
So
Is it in the Games Pass?
It will be.
you're
Day
gonna
one.
play it like Doom. Okay, all right. We'll see how that goes. It'll be good. You should try to play Resident Evil like Doom and
Yeah,
see
right.
how well you do.
Exactly.
I'm going to put on mute. I need to get a glass of water. I'm feeling a little lightheaded.
You need-
Well,
Get maybe
Dan,
some
thank
Tums.
thank you for the news. Lots of great stuff there. We appreciate it. And I think this brings us to our main topic, our geek topic, which is how do you help your friends graduate into more competitive games? Jason, we've all been there before, right? Where you kind of you go to games night and you're like, all right, guys, what do you want to play? And you're looking at the pile and you're like, all right, there's a lot of good stuff. And someone's like, let's play Settlers of Catan. Actually, you're a terrible person to compare that to. You've never you've played Settlers once.
I have played it once because every time I go to a game night, everyone's like, we've all played that like a million times. Let's play that game. So I've only once in my life have been able to play Settlers.
This kind of situation happens to me a lot when we do couples game night. Where it's like, okay, let's play a game, and you're like, okay, like let's look at these games here, and they're like, okay, let's play Phase 10 or something awesome like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, let's get to something a little bit more tricky. Now, and I'll be honest, my wife is kind of like she calls these a little bit more complicated games Justin's games. You
own them all.
Yeah, and I feel like the dividing line is Settlers of Catan. Or like Puerto Rico.
So we set this conversation up in an outline. Let's get into our mindset of ye old days.
Yes, let's do
Pre-Catan.
it.
So pre-Catan, there were certain games that they were like gateway drugs to get into better games. And I'm talking about the 80s and early 90s. Yeah. And as much as it gets a bad rap, Risk is on the top of the list.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I would absolutely say, yep.
Mm-hmm. Risk gives you autonomy. It gives you a dice mechanic. It gives you different levels of your choices have a direct benefit. It's not completely random. Combat is random, but Risk is something you can also wrap your brain around. I have one army. It's going to fight your army. We got to figure out who lives and who dies. And you got to roll a lot of dice, which was great. Yeah. And it kind of broke the seal on people who were like, well, why are we rolling these dice? Why aren't we just moving around the board like Sorry or Monopoly? So,
right.
And Risk still lives on today. You can still buy lots of different versions of Risk. And I had many at one point in time because before I got back in RPGs, I invited people over to my house to play weird versions of Risk. Yeah. And then my gaming group, that was a bad fit for my gaming group, so I sold all those copies.
Well, and you know, the funny thing is even nowadays, you're saying, like, well, I go to gaming conventions, right? And we play board games there, and it's always like, well, like what, Risk?
Yeah. That's
you know, I mean, like, up. That's almost like, Risk is almost like a complicated game for your regular layperson. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
If they're used to playing games like Monopoly or Sorry or something like that, or card games, Risk is like, whoa, that's a complicated strategic game there, buddy.
And it's a gateway drug because once it gets a little boring, you got to move on.
Yeah.
And that's where Axis and Allies was right there. It's like, okay. A lot of people got into more complicated games and going to game stores and learning what games were available from Avalon Hill, even though those Avalon Hill games were mostly, historical games, but those were plenty complicated. And Axis and Allies was like, yeah, I can wrap my brain around World War II. Obviously you're Germany and I'm, Japan or whatever. Great game to get people thinking about different ways. Now, Axis and Allies was a good gateway drug to turn somebody into an all-day gamer. It's like, oh yeah, you want to play a game all day? If you can play Axis and Allies all day, you're good to go.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure. Yeah.
Battleship was one of those great ones too, just because you got to blow stuff up. That always was an awesome. Jay, why'd you put Payday on here? Why was Payday a good gateway drug for you guys?
I like that one because I feel like it has enough additional mechanics than just kind of roll the dice, move your piece, and do it. Like, I think games like Life and Payday, while their themes are very like family-oriented themes, they introduce mechanics that are more than just doing one thing.
Yeah.
Rolling the dice and push. I like Payday because in my mind, Payday is the 10 times better than Monopoly game.
Yeah. And that came out in the 70s too. Payday.
Yeah, and what's great about it is it's one of those games that introduces simultaneous play from back then. You roll the dice, you move on. Depending on where you land, everyone can participate. Everyone can go in on the real estate. They can sell things back. And it moves real quickly. So I like Payday. I think it's one that a lot of people didn't know about. In terms of a game, and it's one that could introduce you to mechanics that were a little the concepts of simultaneous play, and it's not 100% simultaneous play, but just has some of those themes that I think have propagated forward into games of today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it was well designed. If we're still talking about it, and it's from the 70s, that's a well designed game.
Yeah, it comes out every now and then for our family, and the kids can play it. It's not overly complex, which I think is why it could be another kind of gateway
game. Yeah. Well, you also had another one on here.
Yeah, that's a funny one. I put Mousetrap on there.
Mousetrap was legit, man. If you had a Mousetrap set, you were rolling.
Yeah,
I don't know. Kid.
I don't know if this is really a gateway drug versus just games can be more than just roll the dice, move your piece, draw a card. But at the end of the day, Mousetrap really was just that. It was just you got to build a really cool constructor set before you started playing.
Let me tell you why that one was a Class A game. Because if you knew anybody who had all the parts, they were legit gamers.
Still.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Justin. You were talking about this one.
No, I think it's funny. You're like, you're missing the bathtub, and you're like, well, we can't play that game.
Yeah, it's all right. Well, we're done. This game's dead.
But Mousetrap is kind of funny because, like, if you're a kid with Mousetrap, like, that really kind of got you into, like, gaming with your friends.
Yeah.
Where, like, I don't know, like, that I sat down and really played Monopoly with my friends unless, like, we were at a party with our parents. You know what I mean? But I would go over to my friend's house and like, oh, I got Mousetrap. Sweet, let's pull it out.
Yeah.
Let's pull it out, right? And so that kind of started hey, let's play a game together when it's not a quote-unquote game time. Which is, like I said, usually happened when we were at a party with our parents, like a New Year's Eve party or something.
Yeah.
And a bunch of kids were sitting around, you know? So, I did see at the end of this list you have Stratego. That was one of my favorite games growing up. It's one that my parents got us for Christmas.
Same. Yeah.
And it kind of blew my mind a little bit because we were so used to playing Sorry and Monopoly and all this ones that we've talked about ad nauseum. But, you know, Stratego, all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute, I get to set up these pieces in certain ways. And you got the bombs and then you got the counterattacks and all that stuff. And there was a lot more to that game than just like it was almost like a military version of Guess Who.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like,
and guys can
what
die.
piece is that?
Yeah.
And you're like, it's a 7. And you're like, you're dead.
You're trying to get the general. Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
So,
I wish there was
that was a good one.
some version of it that was fun now. I mean, not that to say it's not fun now, but I wish
it's a little more simple.
If it was,
now.
It's pretty basic.
It's pretty basic. I think that probably needs. I think there's a core game element in there that's probably really rich that hasn't been fully plumbed. Maybe I don't know about all the different Stratego versions, but now I'm just because you got me going on the nostalgia pathway with Stratego. Well, let's do something a little less nostalgic. Let's look at the late 90s and early 2000s. And this is kind of where, Justin, you were kicking us off with Settlers of the Catan.
Yeah, so, and one thing, you know, and we can kind of get into this, but I do think that, like, the late 90s, early 2000s was sort of a I don't know if you want to say a renaissance boom for gaming that happened around then. You had a lot of, like, Euro games kind of come into play. You had other board gamers. I feel like in the, you know, we had games like, you know, Payday and Mousetrap and all those other kind of games that sort of came out in the 80s, but there was kind of a drought of, like, good board games for a while. It was almost like you'll take your Monopoly and Sorry and you'll be happy with it.
Right, and you could go back to 1965 or 1975 and play the same board game and not have to learn any rules, right?
Yeah.
And in the
it's
like to
the
your
late
point,
90s.
in that period of time, things really changed. Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that in the late 90s, like we started getting a lot of different games. Game stores started shifting a little bit too, like where you walked in, you're like, what are these games?
Yeah,
I've never seen these things before. Or like you go into like a Barnes and Noble or like something like that, and you start seeing like different games on the shelf, and you're like, what is happening here? So I don't know if that. I don't know what prompted that. I don't know if it was the advent of the internet as well, that things became a little bit more available and connected. But, you know, more of these, I guess, more complicated games started showing up. How would you describe these games compared to...
So I think we should start with Catan. Catan is still one of the best games to help your friends graduate into more complicated games.
Yeah.
Because there's a different set of choices, and your empire building... And the dice are not about moving you around, and the dice aren't even really about conflict, and you really understand you learn different cause and effects, and you learn player interaction in kind of a cool, unique way. That's why the game still holds up so well, and that's why there's so many versions. So it is a really good entry game. Carcassonne I could never get into. That one's next on our list. I played it a couple of times and wanted to like it, and anything. I think it's because I didn't fall in love with it. Ever since anything with a meeple, I kind of tune out 50%. I'm like, oh, there's a meeple. I'm gonna have to ignore this. There's meeples, but that's kind of along the same lines, which was, you have the opportunity to build something. You have a different set of choices. A lot of these get called Euro games for good reasons. Of course, Catan comes from Europe, as does Carcassonne. Mm-hmm. But now, when we use the term Euro game, it's a much broader swath of games than just Catan. But
and sometimes they're pejorative.
Well, and then not exactly. And the nice thing about Catan is that you may find
word of the day.
You may find Catan on a game shelf of somebody who's pretty standard Milton Bradley Parker Brothers. They may have dipped their toe in Catan, and then you'll see all their games, and you'll be like, "So what should we play?" And you see Catan, it's like, "Yep, let's start there." And that's the one that really can bust open the door to other things like Risk did back in the day.
So what was it about Catan that made it that much different? Was because I see a lot of replayability. Now you can have tons of replayability with Monopoly or Risk.
Yeah.
You can have a lot of replayability there, but it seems like there's more quality replayability with like a game like Catan.
I think, except for the soldier mechanic, which is really not that aggressive, and I'm just talking about basic Catan, not Settlers and Knights, but I'm talking about just basic Catan. It has an opportunity of you're kind of land grabbing, and you're kind of trading. The land grabby thing is the meanest thing you can do, and not trading something to somebody who needs something is the meanest thing you can do. There's a real social component to the game, which makes it a lot more fun than, let's say, a Monopoly. And in Catan, if you have the right headspace, it can be collaborative to the point of additive collaborative, not something where you're just constantly trying to one up each other and compete against each other. So, and it also feels like a puzzle. It also feels like once you get the hang of it, the next time you play, you think you can win, and that is a well-designed game.
I think I'll add too really quickly. Multiple ways to win.
Having like the long road or whatever, the biggest army or whatever.
Or you realize like, my lot is with bricks and tree and wood. Yeah. So I need to focus on building certain things. You know what I mean? Versus your friend, so it's a little bit asymmetrical, a little bit with Catan. But there's different ways to score points, different ways to win. Monopoly is not like that, right? Like the way to win is you accumulate properties and charge your friends to death.
Yeah, bleed them dry.
Yeah.
So one of the like what you mentioned about Catan was that those multiple ways to win, and that really comes into play. There's different strategies, right? And those strategies are not necessarily mutually exclusive to each other. You can jump from one strategy to another depending on opportunities that come up. So it's just really well designed. Kind of on the other side of the spectrum from that, but it's also a great gateway game from that era was the 2005 Arkham Horror game. There was a previous version from the 80s, but the 2005 version is kind of the quintessential version that a lot of us are very, very familiar with, and we played it a lot. That was a great game because you were playing a character, and you had kind of a stat block, and you had equipment, a lot like it's kind of an RPG light. It's an RPG in a box. Also, what made Arkham Horror different for its time was the number of expansions that came out. I mean, we talk about expansions today like, of course you have 12 expansions to that game. Well, Arkham Horror did a great job of normalizing that for a lot of players. That were like, ooh, I can buy more to this game and I can add to this game. So for a lot of people who were gaming, the first expansion they ever bought to an existing board game, which you couldn't do with Monopoly, was Arkham Horror. And they just made it more complicated, and it gave it lots of great hours of play and replayability. And that one you don't feel like you're going to win every time. Usually the purpose of that game is to feel like you're about to lose at any moment. But that's Arkham Horror for you.
It's an interesting one and I sat here and looked at it for a while, tried to think what I consider Arkham horror a gateway to move people into more complex games. And I think it's one that can be overwhelming when you say, if you walk someone into the room and you say, hey, I set this game up before you guys got here, we're going to play it, and they look at the board, they might be like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into?
Oh no.
Because there's like, there's like 12 different card decks, 3 or 4 different card sizes on the decks, 5 or 6 different phases that you have to go through. It could be and a bag you can't look into when you pull out monsters. It's just like, it could seem very overwhelming. But once you play, right, play is extremely simple, right? You move and you can either visit the town or whatever, in the different phases. It's one of those games where on your turn you make 1 to 2 choices, and then you let the game play itself for you for the next phases of that turn.
Yeah.
So I think it can be one where you can introduce people to a very heavy story-based game that's not just a mechanic get victory points, but let's play out a story and let's see what happens as the town is crumbling along us as this great evil that's pushing its way over the town. So if people are interested in, like, say, hey, let's all get together and watch movies, like, or we could play a movie out from the 1920s, a horror that takes over a town. Let's do it. It'd be fun.
And another key component of this game is that it is usually, at least back in the early mid 2000s, was one of the first co-op games that people played. And that was another paradigm shift.
Pretty heavy co-op.
We're all working together here to a certain degree, especially when the big monster comes out, and that was a huge paradigm shift from previous eras. If you look at the other games that we have from the old days, Risk, Axis and Allies, Battleship, everyone's out to just destroy each other. Mm-hmm. In Arkham Horror, you're in it together, and that was a unique kind of gateway drug into going to do other cool games that were interesting.
Yeah. I think Hero Quest is another example. Hero Quest was like 1989 was the first published. It was basically an early 90s game. It was very much a dungeon crawl co-op game.
Right.
Let's all get through this together.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think early mid 2000s you had Pandemic come out.
Yeah.
You had Forbidden Island. Like, these are all kind of early prototype co-op games that I don't know if prototype's the right word, but they had, there were co-op games that all of a sudden, like, were much more meaningful than previous attempts at it. So, I think that's a good point. One thing that I wanted to point out is that it was at this time that I think you saw an explosion of a lot of different types of games.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you just had a category of board games before, right? And board games meant basically anything that you're playing on a cardboard surface, but now you had, like, Bang was like a card game that you could play that was essentially a Western version of Murder in the Dark, right? You had some of these other ones like Catan that we talked about. You had Arkham Horror, which is a game. You had we said, like, Hero Quest, that type of thing. You had Magic the Gathering.
Yeah,
was really taking off.
Magic the Gathering. That's the 900-pound gorilla. That changed everything. Broke up a lot of good D&D groups when it came out. By the way, people were not friends when they switched from D&D to Magic the Gathering. That one started out as a real casual game, and either you got into it and you got good at it, you really invested in it, or you jumped to another game that would come out. And so what you would have is, like, there was a Star Trek customizable card game and a Star Wars one, and there was a Vampire the Masquerade version, and these games started to really just penetrate into the gaming stores, and they saved a lot of gaming stores because they didn't take up a lot of shelf space. And it was like a total crack hit. This was like the first time you would, like, say, wow, I have a lot of cards and it's not enough. I need to go triple the number of cards I have to have more cards to build better decks. And that's when you got your secondary market going, where you go buy specific cards for your decks. I remember being a runner for a CPA firm, and I would swing, if I was in the neighborhood of a card store, I would swing by and I would look for a card I wanted to collect 4 of. and to see if there was one in my price range. So Magic the Gathering really opened the doors to very different kinds of gaming. I mean, this was a game, guys, that had TV commercials. Like it was back when TV commercials were a big deal, where there were, weren't as many channels, right? It also had ESPN esports. What we would call esports, but gaming sports. It was like the first non-athletic games that ESPN the ESPN 8, the Hocho would carry. So that was a gateway for a lot of people. I don't know if it still is today. I don't know if I would recommend. People are like, hey, I want to get into something that's a different kind of games. I would never point them to Magic the Gathering.
Right.
However, if they found a bunch of Magic the Gathering cards, like maybe they inherited some in a box or found some in a garage sale and were like, hey, how do I play this game? I would say, well, let me bust out my cards from the 1990s and we'll just sit down and play this.
Yeah, I wouldn't put I would definitely have put Magic Gathering in the early 90s as a gateway card game drug. Nowadays, it's too competitive.
Yeah.
It's too competitive now.
Yeah, it's got a very different barrier to entry as far as being good at it and finding people to play with. The weird thing about Magic the Gathering is you can buy cards at Walmart and Target, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Pushing all those small little, retailers out of business, but still.
Yeah. And you can be convinced that you have a deck worth playing when you buy it at Walmart.
Yes, you can be like, wow, I've got good cards.
Oh, I could play this. Look at this. And then you sit down in the game store and you're out in like turn 3 and you're like, wait, what's going on?
Ooh.
So like, oh, you need to go up to that special glass booth and go get some cards.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that we hit on a lot of good stuff right there. The late 90s, early 2000s, it was an explosion of different types of games that came out, right? And I think that brings us to kind of nowadays. So, you've got your friends who are like, oh, okay, you play games like, so do you play Risk or Catan? I played Catan once or something like that. I mean, I go back to that because I hear that all the time from friends who say they play board games, right? Oh yeah, you game? Cool. Like, what is it? So it always seems to be Catan or Risk or something like that. But what I was thinking about this, when we go to Gen Con and we try a lot of different games, we play a lot of different games, inevitably you're like, oh, what is that game? What kind of game is that? And we can say, oh, it's a 4X. It's a 4X, asymmetric game.
Yeah.
It's a dungeon crawler. It's a co-op horror game. It's you've got these categories of games now.
Worker placement.
Worker placement. Like, you've got these categories of games now that I think companies are tending to kind of say, like, okay, we're going to make a game. It's going to go out on Kickstarter. It's going to have miniatures, but it's going to be an X type of game or X type of game. And so it'll have a certain set of mechanics that they'll use that, as a gamer that has played a lot of different games, you can pick up on quickly because you're like, okay, I've played this type of a game before, and now I know the mechanics. But to the novice who, their most complicated thing is playing Risk, it can seem a little overwhelming to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you get that a lot with Will. To hit your point, whenever I'll sit down at a Gen Con table or a convention table to play a new game, and they'll be explaining the rules, you can see the people who are familiar just with games in general because they'll preemptively ask the edge questions, the rules edge questions, and you're like, oh, well, that was actually a good question. Thank you for asking that, but it's like the thing that'll come up once a game, but they knew to look for it because we just are familiar with the different mechanics that companies build around their games now. So if we were going to define and we're not trying to define the different types of games for nowadays. We're still trying to focus what are gateway drug games for today to help people today in, the 2020s to transition from Milton Bradley's and Hasbro's to kind of these more complex games. What are today's games that would do that?
So the game that I would recommend right now, right this minute, is the Lost Ruins of Arnak.
Totally.
Right? That's a game that we played at Gen Con by Czech Games. I would recommend this game because it was a combination of a worker placement game. It had multiple ways to win, and the mechanics were really easy. And it had some cool components. Like, it had multiple components that you needed to use, but not too many. Right?
And the turns were fast.
And the turns were fast, and you all kind of were doing everybody was playing in a round. Right? You weren't playing exactly at the same time, but everybody was playing in one round. You weren't waiting like 10 minutes for somebody to get their turn done. So that game, I think we played it. It lasted like maybe 2 hours. What we played.
I think it was under that. I think it was about an hour and 40.
Yeah, that's probably about right. But it was a lot of fun and engaging. So somebody who's new, who let's say they're graduating from Monopoly. I'm just going to use that as an example. The act of moving pieces to certain spots is going to be familiar. Tokens and things that they use is going to be familiar, but some of the other mechanics won't be, but they're not so difficult that they couldn't overcome it. I think that's the perfect gateway board game to bring somebody into kind of a more modern.
It's a fun theme, too.
Yeah.
It's a fun theme. It's like an Indiana Jones or Uncharted, like all those kinds of adventure.
Sahara with Matthew McConaughey.
Well, and theme really matters, right? Yeah. All right. Theme matters. And so that's why on the nowadays list I put Horrified, right? Because that's
a great one. I agree with that.
Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, the Invisible Man.
Arkham Light.
Yes, you understand the whole point of the game, which is don't let the monsters get you and save the townspeople. But it's complicated enough to have you want to keep going back and playing it again. Another one, there's 2 games I want to talk about that are great games for large groups. There's Werewolf, the card game where there's villagers and werewolves and stuff like that. That is a great way to get people who are not usually into gamer games doing something different. That's fun.
Social deduction games.
Social deduction. Secret Hitler is kind of a cousin to that. Once people understand the mechanics of Secret Hitler, once they see it being played a couple of turns, then man, that game lights up on fire real fast. You can.
Yeah, I'll tell you that you got to be careful with Secret Hitler. I think I would start with a werewolf over Secret Hitler because if you are not a deep social gamer, and I've seen this, and you play Secret Hitler, I could see people really struggling with the fact that you lied to them.
Yeah. Well,
that's never happened.
And you got to sell this. It's like, hey, you're going to be good at this game if you're good at lying, right? If you're good at, and you walk through the different scenarios of what you're going to say, and there's not that many different scenarios. It's like that person didn't hand me any liberal policies. There's only a few things that can be said after every turn. What were you saying, Justin?
There's nobody's ever had a problem with me lying to them, Jason.
No. The problem is my wife. No, we can hear you, Dan. No, my wife said at the end of a Secret Hitler game that she would never trust Justin ever again.
Ever again?
I just turned around and looked at her, and she just said, "Nope."
Yeah, it was bad.
Good times. So I think that I wouldn't recommend starting with Secret Hitler. I think I would start with a werewolf. I think werewolf is a little bit more of like, if you play werewolf or a mafia, most people are going to be familiar with mafia or murder in the dark. And werewolf, the card game, kind of brings. Well, it's not really a card game, but
let's talk about Stranger Things.
You mean the game you played at Gen Con?
Yeah.
I watched you over the shoulder.
Oh, who played it? Dan, did you play it?
John. It was you and John.
Yeah, I think Dan might have gotten this with his girl too.
Yeah, he did. I think Dan might be having some mic problems right now. We heard him and then he cut out.
Yeah. But I'm gonna be honest with you. The mechanics of it are very easy, and super quick to pick up and pretty good. I'm going to be honest, it's pretty good. So, like, if you want a fun, like, especially if you're into Stranger Things, we talked about how the IP kind of matters in graduating people. Like, if they can latch onto something familiar,
right,
that moves them up, right? Like, trying to get somebody into the Warhammer 40K universe
might be hard.
It might be a little tricky, right? Like, unless they're totally into sci-fi and that kind of thing. But if they've been watching Stranger Things and you're like, hey, here's this card game that you can play in like 20 minutes.
So,
you know, like it's a little bit social deduction, you know, kind of a little bit more complicated. They're going to be playing Secret Hitler not too long afterwards.
Not too long afterwards. Agreed. And another on the IP, I think Villainous is one that brings that IP that everyone is familiar with, right? The original Villainous skin is basically Disney movies that are all mashed together, right? You can pick your favorite kind of Disney villain and play them. And it's a little bit of an asymmetric game because you have different goals that you're going for. So you kind of you can introduce asymmetry in gameplay. But and the mechanics, I think, are a little bit more involved. But because it's got that friendly Disney skin on it, I think people would probably stick around a little bit more to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, the IP kind of matters there a little bit, right?
Yep. Another one that I think is good is battle stations. We've talked about this in our podcast several times. This is one. I would say this is an entry game as long as you have someone experienced that's running it. Because Dan usually runs this for us. He's super experienced. He understands the mechanics, the rules. He doesn't have to dive into the books. But when the players, you know, it's one of those where you have the players playing against the DM, and Dan's the DM. But when the players are playing it, it's a super simple game, and it has throwback feelings to anyone who's ever watched the Star Trek episode.
Right, yeah, totally.
You know, you totally feel like you are playing in a Star Trek episode. It's fun. It's kind of goofy in terms of the aliens. You all have roles, and you're running around to the different stations on the ship, cooperating together to try to fight enemies and other things or other bad ships that are trying to board you. And it's such a simple turn-based system, but it's cooperative, so everyone is always kind of making decisions to try to help. So if you've got someone like Dan who can run it for you, then it can be a very strong entry to get people to look at other games. And we've had success doing this with like couples night battle stations.
Oh yeah, totally.
It's been very, very effective at times.
Yeah, one game that you guys listed here that I think is great is Zombicide. We talked about this last week about how it's kind of still like a living game, that they keep releasing things for it, right? So the replayability of Zombicide is pretty high. The nice thing about Zombicide is that it is a co-op game. So sometimes these co-op games, if they're a good co-op game, sometimes the co-op games are easier to get your friends into with you because you're helping them, and that's okay. You know, like if you're playing like a 4X
That's a really
game,
good point.
You know, if you're playing a 4X game where you're trying to, like, obliterate them through technology or something like that, you know, you're a little hesitant to, like, read their cards or show them your cards and explain to them, like, how to play the game because it's competitive. But if it's co-op, man, like, you're hand in hand and you can kind of help them get there. I think some co-op games are better than others. I feel like Pandemic sometimes you fall into the trap where somebody will end up playing your turn for you. You know?
Yeah, well, and that's a really good point, Justin, because if you're playing a co-op game, if you help someone play their turn, it doesn't feel like they're not playing as much. Because I think we've all had those friends that, or not necessarily friends, but just people that knew people we play with are like, what do I do this? And then they show you their cards. Like, I'm not supposed to see your cards, but that's what this card means.
Yeah.
And like every turn when they draw a card, I don't know what this card means. Can you tell me what I'm supposed to do with this card? It's like, it's kind of ruining the game experience. But yeah. Let me just you know, it's funny. Whenever we play games that have any kind of a complex thing like that with new people, I usually will say, okay, for the first turn, everyone, we're all just going to play with our hands open.
Yeah.
so that we can see everything, and then we'll go through it, and then we'll just swipe it and restart the game. But co-op games, what do I do in my turn? Well, let me help you. Let's figure out what we want to do, and then you got to keep that theme. Let's not what you're going to do. Let's figure out what we're going to do. And I think that can help a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And a nice thing about Zombicide, right, is that you guys can strategize together and say, okay, like, I'm going to go out here. I'm going to make some noise. What do you want to do? You want to run in there and check, search the room for some goods that we need to get? Okay, great. And then you just kind of execute, and you're still rolling your dice for you. You know what I mean? So you're playing your turn, but you can work together. So co-op games can be a very good segue into that.
We had real quick on that. We had a friend that, a guy that we've started to roll into our gaming nights regularly here. His name's Joseph. Really, really fun guy to play with. And the first couple times we played kind of a co-op / maybe team-based games, when he walked away, he said, what was really cool about that is that you guys, he said, you can tell you guys are experienced because even though it's a co-op game, you're still letting people make their own choices and their own decisions. And I think that's really important once you figure a game out. It can be so tempting to have one person drive the car.
Yeah.
With everyone sitting in the back seat, but to say, look, what do I do here? Well, here's some options, but it's your turn, so you choose.
Right.
You decide, and make people make choice. Give them the
totally.
ball and say it's your turn to shoot.
Yep. And I'm going to throw back a little bit to Axis and Allies. We talked about how Axis and Allies was sort of like a segue to our nowadays games. But I will say this, like, I've played Axis and Allies recently with people who are still in the Monopoly mode, right? And the great thing about Axis and Allies is you're on a team, but you're in charge of your country. And so you can talk together about, like, hey, you do like, maybe you can do this, maybe you can do that, maybe you can do that, but you still get to play your turn. You still get to buy your units. You still get to, you know what I mean? So even though Axis and Allies is a little dated, it's been updated a couple of times. I don't think it's like the best kind of strategy game out there anymore, but I still think it's got a lot of merit and a lot of good playtime to it too. And the great thing is if you got somebody who's stuck in sort of the old Parker Brothers mentality, that's a great one because, again, you're on teams that you can help, like, work together, and they don't feel like they've got to figure a whole complicated game out themselves.
Yep.
You can be like, okay, this is your turn, but right now you got to think of what units you want to buy. What do you think you're going to need here? And you can walk them through the steps that helps them get to the end point, and they're going to, without them having to search the rules or think really long and hard about it and all that, so.
Yep. Well, and while I love Twilight Imperium, and I love it, playing it way more than Axis and Allies, I think I would probably recommend Axis and Allies over Twilight Imperium for a transition.
Dude, I feel like Twilight Imperium is like the pinnacle of gaming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it is an amazing, amazing game. But that's like the pinnacle. That's where you have gotten through the Axis and Allies and the Zombicides and the, the Stellaris's and the Terraforming Marses and all those games, and you've made it to Twilight Imperium, and you're playing with people who know what, kind of know what that game's about, and that's an amazing game to play when you get there, right? That's like, you can't climb Mount Everest without doing, like, some smaller mountains first. All right, well, fortunately, we've got Dan back. Dan, you had some microphone issues, and you missed our little bit about Mount Everest and Twilight Imperium, but we kind of backbriefed you a little bit.
You really do have to be thoughtful about what games you introduce to people. I was at a retreat after hours with my boss and my boss's boss, and Sean is a buddy of ours, and I work with Sean. And we were going to sit down and play Call to Adventure, and my boss's boss sat down, and she's like, show me how to play this game. About 20 minutes in, she's like, I really don't want to play this game. She didn't even play one round. So you may think that you've got a really good game that's a really good entry, and I thought Call to Adventure was. But know the person you're dealing with, right? You know, there's a big difference between somebody who's played Axis and Allies so many times they can recite it in their sleep, but they've never RPG'd, versus somebody who I started passing out tarot-sized cards and they started getting a little weird. And every time I do one of these I gotta be me things, it always comes back to bite me in the butt. I'm like, well, this is me. This is what I'm into. I gotta be me. And she's like, I need to go back to my room to write emails. So
you're like, let me pull out my Uno deck. We'll play Uno.
Well, you know, and that's where a game like Sushi Go is like a really cool way of matching and sharing cards and stuff like that. Sushi Go could be one of those games where, you know, it's a lot more like a suit card game than it is you know, one of these gamer games. So there's other ones out there. You just have to kind of know where to, you know, where you got to know your audience. You're not helping anybody if you open up a game and people stand up and walk away. So, and it takes a little risk. You never know. She may have loved it and we may have had a gamer, but that didn't happen that night.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. So, yeah, I think this topic's really interesting because the goal is to expand your gaming group, right? And it's funny because my wife gives me a hard time again. Like she says all the time, like, oh, those are Justin's games and things like that. And my kids are slowly coming around to some of the games that I like playing because they realize that some of these other games just aren't that fun after you've played them so many times, you know? And so, the goal again is to expand your group, expand your social sphere, expand those people who can play these with. And so sometimes I wouldn't say sometimes, all the time, you got to meet the people where they're at and then just kind of pull them along a little bit. Sometimes somebody's ready to jump right into an RPG, like myself and John Tross, we were ready to jump into an RPG, and away we went with that, right? But that was after having played like Axis and Allies forever and reading fantasy novels and playing video game RPGs. Like I had prepped myself unwittingly to be able to jump into an RPG, no problem, and start playing. But not everybody's there. So you got to kind of meet them where they're at, you know, and find out what they like, what they'd be interested in, and get those gateway games in their hands and in front of them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You'll find something. And some people, if they're just more interested in social, then that's great. Find a social game like Sushi Go or one of those or Werewolf. But I think people generally like spending time with other people. And if they're going to sit down and say, let's play a game, then you've already opened one door, which is let's spend some time together as friends.
Yeah, and I mean, you got to read the room, right? If you're there with a bunch of your wives who want to talk more than they want to play, get a very social game then.
Yep, social game. That'll help with the talking.
Yep, get a very social game.
Anything except Bunko. Don't let them buy Bunko. They like the Bunko, and the only good thing for Bunko is to rate it for D6s if you don't have enough. Let me just say that. If you see it on your shelf, just steal the D6s out of it. Yeah. And people go, we can't play this game. There's no dice. And I go, I don't know what happened, sweetie.
Yeah. And it's funny because there's been times where, again, our buddy John has organized a Axis and Allies game day and a Twilight Imperium game day where we went into that game knowing that it was going to take us 8 to 10 hours to play. Right? And we had budgeted our time, and we had an amazing time on both times playing it.
Yep.
Because we knew what we were going in for, right? And so if you know your friends, if you know what they're into, find that game that would, make them be like, oh, wow, this is great. And play that a few times and then introduce them to something else that you think they'd like. So slowly but surely. And then all of a sudden you've got a person who's willing to try anything or go to Gen Con with you, because they're like, oh, wow, like I love playing these types of games. Let's go to Gen Con and do more of it. So that's the goal. I think a great example of this, actually, Dan, is our friend Adam.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Who who randomly saw a post on my website about I was playing Star Wars Legion at GuildCon, and he came over. He played Warcry with us. He ended up joining the Star Wars RPG. He's now running a session.
Yeah.
With his buddies, and I mean, like he's in it. Like he's in it now, and that's a great example. I mean, he played before, right? He was playing X-Wing and Legion and stuff like that. So it's not like we had to introduce him or do some gateway stuff, but we definitely did some gateway RPG, which was Star Wars.
Yeah, that's very accessible, and everybody's not going to end up dying. That helps too with these players. But circling back, you have to keep inviting somebody new. If you're not inviting somebody new on a regular basis, your gaming group is going to get a little stagnant. And just keep asking people, and if they say no, that's fine. If there's couples that don't want to come play games with you for couples game night, now that COVID is pretty much over, I want to get back into doing that. We bought a house with a whole dedicated game room because we had a horrible multi-purpose basement in my last house. Yet we have yet to do a couples game night in 2 years. And I'm blaming COVID, but nonetheless, expand out your group. And once you build trust, and once people are like, oh, so-and-so has games that are fun and different, and I like going over there because I know I'm going to be exposed to a different kind of game, then that can be pretty great too. And pretty soon, what happened to us in our little RPG group, Jay, that, a few of us had started in the D20, pretty soon we've split into basically the equivalent of 3 groups. We've had so many players come and go. Maybe even 4 if we really started counting noses. So anyway, keep it up. Keep up the good work, you guys. Keep gaming. It's a great hobby, and it always you can always get out of it what you put into it.
Yeah, and it brings world peace.
World peace.
That's right. If we could just war game instead of wars, that would be way cooler.
Right.
It'd be like sharing a Coke with everybody.
A Coke Zero.
That's right. Well, thank you everybody for listening to the show. Do you guys have some ideas of what types of games are perfect to introduce your friends to get them to that next level? Share it in our comments on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Give us what you like. Give us what you know. And until then, keep the dice rolling and have a great night.
See ya.
Good night.